Ooh, this water is hot. Hey everybody, it's your old pal Wood Doofus here. It is March and I decided to finally get back to my deck project. I haven't worked on it since winter started last year, and we are working on the stringers that wrap around the base of the deck, so let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I needed to do was to figure out how big my stringer was going to be, and like most people's yards, mine is not level all the way around, so I had to find the tallest part of the deck, or the largest distance from the top to the ground, and measure it from there. So this is the highest part of the deck from the ground, so I want to measure from here. So I started by clamping a board to the highest part of the deck, and all I want to do now is measure the distance to the ground to determine my overall rise. And it looks like my overall rise is somewhere, it's different up and down, but it's somewhere between 28 and 30 inches. So most building codes are going to require your steps to be somewhere in the range of a little over 6 inches to a little under 8 inches. So I'm going to measure the rise of each of my steps at 7 inches, which gives me 28 inches, which is my overall rise. So if you do the math there, you can see that I need about 4 steps. So even though I said I needed 4 steps, you can see that the stringers I made so far have 3 steps on them, but that's because I'm going to make the initial step just part of the deck there. So I got 7 inches for each of the rises, and the way I determine the run of each step is I just want 2 of these decking boards to fit on each stair tread, and so that's 11 inches. So once I determined my rise and run, which is 7 inches and 11 inches, I went ahead and made a jig with my framing square, and on the inside of the square I measured 7 inches here and 11 inches there, and then I clamped my framing square to a board which functions as a jig that you can make consistent stringers with. So I'm going to start with the 11-inch run, and so I put the angle of the square on the top edge, and I go ahead and mark it there, and then I cap it off right there across the top. And at that point, you just find the mark where that run ended and start with your 7-inch rise right there. Mark the inside and keep moving along the board until you get the number of steps that you need. When I get to the other side, I just mark the 7 inches and then cap it off right there. So another option that you have, instead of using your jig on every single stringer, you can just go ahead and take the first stringer you made, if you made it right, and use it as a template to mark all the other ones. The key thing to remember though is to use the same stringer as your template on every other one, otherwise you're making a copy of a copy and they'll start to get different as you go along. When you're talking about how many stringers that you need to make, most building codes are probably going to require anywhere between 16 to 24 inches. Anything more than that, you're going to get a little bow in the boards as you step on them. So for this project, since it's just 3 steps down, I decided to do 24 inches on center, and the reason I did that is because these 2x10s are really expensive. They cost like $8,000 for each one, so I went ahead and maximized how many stringers I could get out of each board. So when I'm ready to cut the stringer out, I just go ahead and freehand it along the lines that I've marked. I don't know if there's a better way to do it, but it's not as hard as you think if you've never done it, as long as you have a little bit of experience with the circular saw. So when you're cutting into the corners here, I just go about maybe a ½ an inch past, but it's still going to leave some material down here that you need to remove with some other kind of device. And I'm just using this little handsaw. I installed a cleat all the way around the perimeter of this for my stringers to sit on top of, and I notched out each stringer so I have a place to sit on top of that cleat. Now this is a structural connection, so I need to use structural screws for that. I'm using these timber lock 2.5-inch structural screws to hold the cleat on there, and that should be sufficient for most building codes. I'm also going to be reinforcing each one of these stringers with these Simpson strong ties, and I'm going to be screwing those in with the galvanized Simpson strong drive, which are also structural. All right, so it's starting to get dark. I've been working all day. Actually, I've been working 2 days on these stringers, but as you can see, I had to put some paver stone ends at the landing of each one of the stringers. And what I did was I started with these two here, and they were the ones that have the maximum height there. So everything had to be referenced off of the height of these two, and I was able to go along as the grade got higher and dig each hole a little bit deeper as I went along. It took me a long time. I haven't even gotten to this side yet, so I guess that's for another day. All right, so it's been a couple weeks, and I finally got back to it yesterday and finished this side of the stringers. And like I was saying before, I needed a place to land for each stringer, and I had to make them level with each other. So starting with these two right here, I grabbed my level, and as I went along, I'd have to dig a little bit for each one of these paver stones to level it with the one to its left as I went this way anyway. So each one of these I leveled off and went along there, and as I went along, the holes got deeper and deeper. I used some gravel underneath them after I dug them to get them just right. I got some bricks here, but they're not really in place. They're just kind of where they're going to be, but I need to dig them in there to create a little gap where the earth was dug up. And this is the kind of blocking I need to finish on the other side. I just have one on top, one under, one on top, one under, and that just makes them easier to connect and gives some structural stability to them. So I just measured the distance between the two top pieces after they're connected and cut a piece like that. And I gotta do that over here. Alright, so I finally got all the risers in. It took me a while, and what made me take a long time is every single one of these is like 7¼ inches high, so I have to take these 1x8s, cut off like 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch, basically a 1/2 inch cut off. And also on this corner here, that's where I take up most of my time, because I had so many of these 22.5-degree angles to cut on this section, and of course the mirrored section over there. And I had to add in blocking to make sure there's enough to accept the decking boards when I come around with that. But overall, it looks pretty good. I got my temporary steps over there so I can get up and down. At the very end is my big pile of cut-offs and all kinds of fun stuff. So next step is the treads. Yeah, this is classic wood doofus. You can see I put my first decking board down for the treads, and I get these 16-foot long boards, so I don't have too many seams, but it looks like I'm gonna have to have a seam anyway, because even though this decking board is mostly straight along its edge, I don't think my deck is straight. I think it's a little bit cupped on the inside right about here, so there's this huge gap. So I am gonna have to cut the board at the seam and maybe do a little angle here. I'm using the same no-show camo fasteners here that come with my camo fastener system. This is what I did all the other decking boards with. I'm gonna use them for here. I'm gonna use them for these treads also, but I can't really use the fastener system because of the riser. So I'm just gonna freehand them. But The plus side is that they won't show too much because of their small head there. Well, it was daylight, but the first corner turned out okay. I do know that this board had a little bit of a cup in it, which is why there's some lippage issues here, but I think these boards are going to be curling one way or the other over time. Angle-wise, things turned out pretty good. I had to tweak this angle a little bit just to get the seams to match up a little better, but so far so good. Pick this up tomorrow. Alright, so as always, it took me a while to finish, but I finally capped it off with the top here, and had to round off these corners to make them work right, but that's not a problem. I think I got some gaps here that I might put some little triangles in. One thing that I noticed, you probably see this little strip right here. Now, I didn't measure right on that top step. Down on these other ones, there's the riser is going to take up about 1 inch of space, so it still has a good hangover, but this one did not hang over because I should have shortened that top run basically by 1 inch, so I had to add these little spacers. I'm not too hurt about that, but something to remember in the future if you're doing this. Those little stamps they put on the wood, I had to sand those off, but it should be fine once it's stained. So let's back up and take a look at the whole thing here. Looks pretty good. I guess all I have to do now is stain the thing, but I think I have a different idea of what I'm going to do instead. Alright everybody, I'm going to relax here for a minute, I think. Make sure to stay tuned to my videos and subscribe if you want to be an honorary doofus. And if you're building a deck, I'm going to have a lot more videos coming out. So be sure to subscribe and let me build along with you a little bit. Otherwise, I'm going to take a breather here, but as always, don't be afraid to be a doofus.